I'm someone who loves sound design, and when it comes to horror games, sound design is pretty important. I mean, you gotta create an atmosphere and ambience to immerse your players into whatever creepy and dark tone you're setting. It's no secret that Five Nights at Freddy's has some incredible sound design, even if a lot of the sound effects that are used in the earlier games are just stock sounds, or audio clips taken from different pieces of media and heavily edited. Yeah, we all know that one. But regardless, the sounds are put to use. I'm far from the first person on YouTube to talk about the sound design in Five Nights at Freddy's, and if you haven't watched these videos by Scruffy, I very much recommend checking them out. Not only does he go in depth about the many spooky sounds in Five Nights at Freddy's, but his art style and visual representations are just so awesome. So instead of sitting here and breaking down how sound is used effectively in FNAF, in this video I specifically want to talk about all the different sounds used to portray animatronic movement. Animatronics are big, heavy pieces of machinery, and honestly, you'd think that they make a lot of noise when moving, but as it turns out, animatronics don't typically make a whole lot of noise. I mean, check out this video by CEC Nevada on YouTube. This person recorded the Chuck E. Cheese animatronics starting up and hanging out during pre-show, and they just kinda turn on. Yes, there is a lot of background noise, but even when the Jasper T. Jowls animatronic moves its torso, it's relatively silent. I'm sure that if you were right next to it, you'd hear the whirring and spinning of animatronic devices, but even those are generally pretty quiet. That being said, I do love it when animatronics sound like giant killer robots. I mean, take this scene from the first FNAF movie, for example. Bonnie sounds amazing. Is it a little over the top? Maybe. Can animatronics actually move like that? I don't think so. I haven't seen Chuck E. Cheese animatronics roaming around during the day. I think that's not realistic. But I don't know, at least for me there is something so satisfying about these heavy mechanical robot sounds. Before we dive into the games, I want to quickly say a couple things about my last video. Firstly, thank you everyone so much for leaving comments about all of the animatronic names that I completely missed. I forgot to talk about Glitch Trap, Burn Trap, Scrap Trap, the Freddles, the Withereds, and I'm sure there are even more. In fact, I know there are more. Secondly, I'm way more behind on the lore than I thought because a lot of the comments were saying that Crying Child, actually the name now is Dave and not Evan. So whatever his name is, at least we can all agree that he's still a child and still crying. Either way, I apologize for missing a lot of the names, and I do appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to watch the video and correct me in the comments. Now let's talk about the criteria for this video. I want to cover all the different sounds that animatronics make when moving throughout each game, and I'm talking physically moving, not just audio cues or movement options. I want to talk about how the sounds of animatronics are portrayed in Five Nights at Freddy's, so if an animatronic makes a vocal sound or anything resembling like a voice to cue movement, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm referencing, Nightmare Fredbear laughing in FNAF 4, for example, whenever he goes into your closet or onto your bed. Although, I do love his laugh. Also, I won't be talking about FNAF World or any of the Scott teaser/troll games. I just don't think they're relevant in the context of this video, but I still love those games, so, honorable mention to those. Okay, without further ado, let's dive into it. The sounds that Bonnie and Chica make in the first FNAF game when moving next to your office sound like this. While the sound isn't inherently mechanical or animatronic-like, it still paints this horrifying picture of large, haunted animatronics hauling their heavy endoskeletons towards you. What works so well with this sound effect is that you never actually see the animatronics move behind those doors, aside from, this guy. All you can do is check the cameras and make sure you know where those footsteps actually led to, otherwise it might already be too late. Foxy is our visual exception, and when he runs at you, it sounds like this. This sound of rapid footsteps sprinting down the hallway coupled with seeing Foxy run at you instills panic as you quickly try and close the door in time before he gets in. If you do manage to stop Foxy, this is the sound he makes upon reaching your door. What always unnerved me about this sound is how robotic it is. It isn't a quick knock 3 times or even a single knock of a failed attempt getting in, but rather a cold, unfeeling, repeated knock at the door. Makes you really believe he's haunted. Freddy also has a unique footstep sound when he moves, however, it's a bit tricky. Most of the time, people know that when Freddy moves, he laughs, which, as I mentioned before, is something I wasn't going to talk about. But right before Freddy laughs, this sound effect plays. What's interesting is that this sound effect is part of the same audio file as the Foxy running sound effect, but it doesn't play until the very end of it, like this. It's quick and gets cut off by his laugh, but these two footstep sounds are distinct, and the echo effect adds to the atmosphere of it as well. Overall, one of the things that I loved about the original FNAF games is that the characters bounce around the cameras at nearly an impossible speed. Yes, you can technically hear their footsteps, but because you don't actually see them move, it adds to this feeling that they really are haunted and moving in unnatural or inexplicable ways. Later titles down the line, when you see animatronics move, it just kind of looks like they're killer robots or, you know, artificial intelligence gone rogue. It takes away from the feeling of haunted or possessed animatronics, you know. Not to say I don't love the way they move and sound in the future of the franchise, just that I think the vibes are very different. Interestingly enough, the first animatronic movement that you hear in FNAF 2 isn't in the gameplay. It's actually in the intro cutscene to the game, in which you see the FNAF 1 location through Freddy's eyes. Anytime you move your mouse left or right, it moves Freddy's head, and you hear this audio. Pretty cool stuff. You know, this cutscene comes back a couple times with a few twists, and I imagine this is the whirring sound that all animatronics make when they move joints and other robotic servos and such. Moving on to the gameplay, anytime Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, Toy Freddy, or any of the withered animatronics move, you hear this. This sound is a lot more just generic footstep sound, but at the same time it still captures the tone of FNAF 2 pretty well. I mean, the footsteps are quicker and more fast-paced, as is the gameplay of FNAF 2. Each time they move, a shorter, edited version of that clip plays, and the footsteps can be heard anywhere in the building. I can kind of see how the withered animatronics would make this sound when walking, as they definitely still have that heavy, padded animatronic foot sound to them, but these footsteps are a little too fast for me to visualize, really. I always imagined the Withereds would walk at a speed similar to this. Instead, the in-game footsteps are kinda just... Mangle also has a unique movement sound when they crawl around, and that sounds like this. I love this sound effect, and I remember always picturing what Mangle looked like when moving, and it freaked me out. The sound of heavy, loose metal slithering around the ceiling and walls, slowly coming towards you, works very well here. When any animatronics enter the vents, this is what it sounds like. While the vent noise isn't necessarily coming from an animatronic, I do like the slow thumping of ventilation ducts, creating imagery of heavy animatronics trying to claw their way through such a tight space. When FNAF 3 first came out, there was no sound that Springtrap made when he moved, only if he entered a vent, which sounded like this. The sound of Springtrap entering a vent, I think, works very well, as the kind of clunky, banging sounds it creates helps visualize a haunted corpse trying its best to move into a vent. Sometimes if he entered a vent, you had a lot of time before he reached the other side, but other times, the desperate crawling sound meant certain death if you were caught making a mistake. It wasn't until a month after release, on April 2nd, in version 1.031 of the game, that Scott added the sound effect of Springtrap moving and making strange moaning sounds. Take a listen. The sound works well for the atmosphere of the game. The slow, almost wet-sounding footsteps help drive the narrative forward that this building and Springtrap are rotten, run down, and leaking from the rain. The ghostly moaning sounds portray Springtrap as still a haunted suit, only this time the corpse is visibly in there, taunting you as he walks freely in a building surrounded by memories of his past. I won't cover Springtrap's movement from Dead by Daylight's FNAF DLC, as that's technically not a FNAF game, but he does make some pretty awesome sounds as he moves, so honorable mention. FNAF 4 has a lot to do with audio, so much so that there is even a challenge mode in which you can play the game completely blind, relying only on audio cues. This sets the tone of the game pretty well. I mean, it's dark, quiet, and terrifying. Listening closely to the animatronics is the key to survival, but because your ears are so open, it makes the jump scares that much worse. The sounds that Nightmare Bonnie and Nightmare Chica make when walking in the hallways are this. I always loved the footsteps in this game. The sound of giant metal nightmares crushing down against a soft plush carpet with each step can be heard ever so faintly behind the doors. It sounds like something that was never meant to be heard. I mean, why would those two things ever interact? While Nightmare Freddy doesn't have any sounds besides his jump scare, which is the same sound as everyone else, Foxy does have his own unique movement sound, as he runs back and forth outside your room looking for an opening. One mistake is all he needs to sneak into your room, and then... Something I always found interesting about Foxy's footsteps is that they sound very similar to his footsteps in FNAF 1. The returning fast, rapid, sprinting sound is a reminder that Foxy is back and scarier than ever. Arguably. Some people don't think that the nightmares are very scary when it comes to their design. All I'll say about it is that I'm glad Foxy didn't keep his tongue that he had in the teaser.
Arr, I came for ye booty.
Nightmare Mangle also shows up in the Halloween DLC, but they don't make any different sounds than Foxy does, so, Besides their radio static, which comes back, but that's a vocalized audio cue, so yeah. When Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmare, or in the Halloween DLC, Nightmarion run in the halls, this is the sound that they make. One of those two distinct audio clips plays anytime they run back and forth between your doors. It's honestly a terrifying sound of running. I mean, trying to picture these large monsters moving at this speed is also quite difficult, but in this case it works in their favor, making it seem uncanny that they can move at that speed. Otherwise, if you think about it too hard, it might kind of just look like... Nightmarion making that sound is funny because I always imagined he would just slither up to your door, but I totally understand why the footsteps sound effect was reused for the Halloween DLC here. We'll also see this come up later, so stay tuned. The last characters that scamper around are Plushtrap and Nightmare Balloon Boy. In between nights, you play this minigame called Fun with Plushtrap, or in the Halloween DLC, Fun with Balloon Boy, and they sound like this as they run in between the little rooms. Clearly the same audio as Foxy's running sound, but just sped and pitched up. Captures the feel of Plushtrap and Balloon Boy perfectly. I mean, they're little gremlins, and the way they move should emulate that. Okay, editing Tugas here. I didn't mention Jacko Bonnie or Jacko Chica, so, doing that now. They don't make any different sounds from their normal counterparts when they move, so, nothing special, but they do look cool. There are many miscellaneous noises and metal sounds that take place in Sister Location. From an atmosphere standpoint, I think Sister Location is one of the best in the series. This weird future steampunk aesthetic works really, really well, and the sounds are just so... unsettling. So I've done my best to organize the sounds that I think animatronics are supposed to be making, but I could be wrong about a couple of them, so take these with a grain of salt. The first time you hear a sound an animatronic is probably making is upon leaving Night 1 through the Circus Gallery vent. As you exit, you hear this banging sound. I always imagine this as one of the Biddy Babs or Mini Renas banging against the vent, but I really don't know for sure. The next animatronic sound you hear in the game is one of my favorite sound effects in the entirety of Five Nights at Freddy's. It plays when you are in the elevator on night 2 as you're on your way back into the bunker. Take a listen. Something about the way the sound just echoes through the tiny crawl space of the bunker gives me chills every time. The fact that we don't even know what is making this sound as we have no choice but to descend closer towards it, Like, I don't know, it just makes my claustrophobia go haywire. I always assumed it was one of the animatronics, but leaving it up to the imagination makes it much scarier. The sound does come back when you enter a hiding spot that Circus Baby tells you about on night 2, and after that, the Biddy Babs show up, so, you know, perhaps it's one of them the first time too, as like foreshadowing. Either way, it still makes me deeply uncomfortable. The Biddy Babs also make a banging sound when you're inside the hiding spot, and it sounds like this. For some reason, I always imagined it as one of them like holding a big metal pipe and tapping it or scraping it around, but looking back on it now, I imagine it was supposed to be one of the Biddy Babs tapping on the metal cover used for the hiding spot. It makes sense. The hard shells that these animatronics have are definitely a weird metal of some kind, and this is likely the sound it would make if it were tapping on another piece of metal. Creepy. The next animatronic to make noise in this game is technically Ballora. However, she doesn't actually make any sounds that resemble like movements or animatronic parts, more that just her music plays through her as she moves around, so I don't really count this. However, she's still awesome, so another honorable mention. When you reach the breaker room on night 2, Funtime Freddy is introduced as a threat, and as you try to bring the power back to the building, he makes this sound when he moves. Each time he moves, similar to the footsteps in FNAF 2, the audio clip is cut and edited to be shorter, but certain sections of that audio can play whenever he moves. I think this sound is extremely effective. I mean, paired with the flickering lights and occasional glimpse of what he looks like, Funtime Freddy sounds like a giant sentient mass of metal and parts moving around in the dark. That's exactly what he is. Markiplier describes it perfectly.
But I gotta listen for the shuffly shoe of a wild bear.
The next animatronic to shuffly shoo around is Funtime Foxy. As you crawl through Funtime Auditorium, trying not to alert him to your presence, you can hear Funtime Foxy making these scuffling sounds as she roams around the dark around you. It's actually the same sound effect that Bon Bon makes on the same night shortly after you get through the Funtime Auditorium. When you're repairing Funtime Freddy, the Bon Bon hand puppet is attached to Freddy's hand, and once it escapes and scurries around, you hear this as you try and push her button. Cool. I hate it. It's also worth mentioning that when you open Funtime Freddy's faceplates and chest cavity, it makes this sound. Technically a movement that an animatronic makes, I think. It could just be like a stinger, but I can't really tell, so I'll include it. It doesn't really serve a purpose besides creating a jump scare and a pretty tense moment, but it is a fun moment. Ballora is back, and this time she is not doing well. You get to watch her get the scooping treatment, and this is the sounds that her metal shell make while being stabbed repeatedly with a big ol' ice cream scooper. In the same section, we get to hear what spring locks sound like while winding them up inside an unknown suit. Here's what that sounds like. I guess this isn't really an animatronic sound, as spring locks don't exist, but this is a cool representation of what they would sound like if animatronics actually had spring locks. Ennard is technically the next animatronic to make a noise while moving, and although the main noise I want to talk about is in the private room section, there is this audio file that plays whenever Ennard is present near you. The file name is strange_voice, so I guess it isn't really Ennard's body making that noise, but to me I always thought it was. It's also just a really creepy audio, and in the sections where it plays, I love the feeling of impending doom it instills over the player, whether it was intentional or not. Ennard has more distinct animatronic sounds in the private room section of the game, and anytime he moves, he makes this sound. This squeaky metal sliding sound, while strange at first, is actually quite fitting. Ennard is literally a mess of wires, tubes, and animatronic devices. It sounds to me like the intention with this noise was that instead of Ennard walking around or moving like any bipedal entity would, he moves around kind of like a snake or maybe even the way Mangle would. I mean, Ennard is trying its best to mimic what a human being would walk like, and I imagine this isn't an easy thing to do if you're just a bunch of wires and eyeballs. Towards the later end of the night, you start to hear this sound all around you as Ennard tries to get into your office, and eventually, your skin. You'd think that Sister Location Custom Night wouldn't have much to talk about, but actually, there's quite a bit of new sounds here that I'm a big fan of. Funtime Freddy actually gets a chance to run around this time instead of being cooped up in his breaker room. He has 2 cameras that he can move in between on either side of your office, where he tries to launch Bonbon at you after screaming about it. When he moves in between them, this audio plays. Depending on which side he's running to, you'll hear the audio go from left to right or right to left. The sound is kind of the same as the Foxy-esque running sound effect that we've heard before, but I just like it because it's directional, and there's a bit of an echo to it as well. Both Bonbon from Funtime Freddy and the Biddy Bab in the vent also make a new sound when attempting to get into your office, and if you close the door on them successfully, this audio will play. Sounds a bit more hollow and lighter than the sound Foxy makes when hitting your door in FNAF 1. I also appreciate this sound effect because it's the first real time that we've had a confirmed failed attempt on your door since Foxy in FNAF 1. Other times, like with Bonnie or Chica, or Ennard in the Night 5 private room, usually you just have to find the animatronics elsewhere on the cameras or that they've left your lights to see if the attempt to get in failed. This sound effect will also return later in Ultimate Custom Night, so it is a good one. Biddy Bab also has another sound effect that she makes, and that's when she's in the vent ahead of you about to attempt to enter. It sounds like this. Another lighter, hollow vent duct sound. You know, it makes sense for her size. Funtime Foxy is the last animatronic that has some physical sound in Custom Night, and that's when he knocks on your door. Take a listen. This time, Foxy's knocking is a bit more aggravated, like he's really trying to get in there. It sounds kind of like the knocking you hear in your headphones that makes you think it's coming from your real door. You know the one. Don't worry, I'm not gonna play it to trick you. Or maybe I will. Nah. I won't. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator is a bit of a shorter one to cover, as there isn't really a lot of variety to how the animatronics sound in this game. Funnily enough, the first animatronic noise you'll most likely run into is Helpy hitting the floor and breaking his back. The sound that plays when that happens is this. It's short and sweet, and you know, it looks like Helpy's made of plastic, so I can see this kind of sound playing if you dropped him on the floor at a rough angle. Poor guy. As for the actual animatronic threats that exist in the real gameplay section of the game, you have Scrap Trap, Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, and Lefty. None of these guys have animatronic sound effects other than their voices. However, the vents make a lot of noise when they move around. Take a listen. Even though this vent noise is less thumpy than the previous titles, I think it does fit the aesthetic of this game very well. The animatronics you're dealing with in the vents are wiry, scrappy, and overall just kind of a mess. Except for Lefty, you know? Lefty, he looks alright. It makes sense for the vent sound to sound a little lighter, and it almost has this scraping quality to it that I think works well. Some of the sounds also give the impression that the animatronic is quickly scampering out of the vent, which we've never had portrayed in previous titles before, you know? It's just been a consistent vent sound that's always the same. I'm a big fan of these sounds, and overall just a big fan of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, so yeah, moving right along. Ultimate Custom Night is mostly just reused audio files with a touch of editing, so nothing really exciting here. There is one noise that's technically a new sound effect that I think an animatronic is making, and it plays when you use the heater to push back the mediocre melodies in the vent ducts. Did you catch that? It plays a couple times in succession when you use the heater, so yeah. I don't really know if this sound is supposed to represent the actual animatronics being pushed back by the heat and making that noise, or if it's supposed to represent the UI sound effect of the little icons being pushed back. I don't know. Another sound effect that I think is worth talking about is when Scraptrap is attempting to get into your office. Basically, if you have him activated in the night, at any random point he'll come crashing through the side vent making this sound. From what I can gather, it's a bunch of the sister location vent noises mashed together, so I wouldn't say it's anything new, but just trying to imagine Scraptrap absolutely booking it through that vent to get to you is definitely a scary thought. The sound that plays when an animatronic of any sort gets blocked by a vent or a door, this plays. Another reused sound effect from sister location, specifically the custom night. It's cut off shorter and there's no echo like there is in sister location, so yeah. Other than that, there aren't many new, specifically animatronic sounds in Ultimate Custom Night. There are lots of new sound effects though. I'm not saying there aren't any at all. It's actually quite full of awesome sounds, but yeah. Either way, that's it for Ultimate Custom Night. So, FNAF Help Wanted is the first game where we get into New Age FNAF. Okay, I'm gonna add like a cool effect there. And if I can't figure out how, then I don't know, maybe I'll just... There are a lot of sound effects in this game, but many are reused from previous FNAF games, so I'm only going to cover either new ones or stuff that's worth talking about in the context of the video. Foxy takes the stage as an animatronic that gets a lot of attention and cool sounds in this game. In the FNAF 1 section of Help Wanted, if Foxy runs at you and you manage to close the door, this is the sound that plays. Oh yeah, he really wants in this time. And I love the use of the scraping sound effect here. It definitely implies that Foxy's scraping the door with his hook, and it works so well. Foxy also has some awesome animatronic sounds in his parts and service level, and they sound like this. You have to try and fix his malfunctioning servos by replacing or putting in these colorful batteries. As someone who is colorblind, this level was a nightmare for me, but I was so enamored by Foxy's unique animations that it didn't matter. The more time I got to spend listening to these sounds, the better. Nightmarion is back in his Night Terrors level, and this is the slithering sound that plays when his tentacles, yes tentacles, enter your room. This sound, while horrible and gross, is absolutely more on par with what I expected him to sound like. He's long, spindly, and I guess wet? I was also surprised to find that Circus Baby doesn't make any sounds when she walks around at her Night Terrors level, but I guess it would sound kinda goofy if she was clomping around in that small space.
Excuse me.
Now on to the Halloween DLC, The Curse of Dreadbear. Another time here where I would have loved to see some animatronic movement sound effects happen, but I just love his animations too, so I wanted to quickly show him. Grim Foxy, who's this fiery guy, makes this sound when he walks. In his level, you have to collect keys to escape this like corn maze attraction while he chases you around. His AI is pretty annoying as it just kind of tracks you until you hide in a little picture cutout.
Target acquired. Target locked.
When he inevitably gets you, you get to watch him scrape a stone wall with his hook, and it sounds like this. The Trick or Treat level is chock full of new footstep sounds. You basically play Guess Who's Answering the Door with the Withered Gang, but you can only see through the windows, so you have to pay attention to who stops in front of the door when crossing. What I found really interesting is that each character has a unique walk cycle, meaning their footsteps have some personality to them. I'll play them all in succession with each other, then I'll break it down. Each character's footsteps can have varying speeds to them, depending on how quickly they run across the big room. Bonnie and Chica's sound relatively similar, with Chica's having a bit more urgency to it. Freddy sounds like he has a limp, which I think works really well with his design. I mean, Withered Freddy always seemed kind of off, so I like that. Balloon Boy is just scampering, which is to be expected. And Foxy's running is also fitting, because, you know, he runs. In Danger Keep Out, Jacko Bonnie and Jacko Chica make this noise when they're about to move. It's not technically an animatronic sound, but I just think it's neat, and it is coming from their bodies, so, you know, I count it. And finally, Dreadbear makes these horrifying footsteps as he continues to make his way to you on the third night. Once he gets close to your office, he breaks the hallway light with how tall he is, and the footsteps are louder. Very, very good sound design here. I'm a big fan. The constant rhythmic thumping of Dreadbear's footsteps are a reminder the entire night that he's on his way. You can only slow him down, but you can never fully stop him. And he's a big robot, so the sound design definitely shows that. And I believe that's it for Help Wanted in terms of new animatronic sounds. This game took a while to comb through, so I may have missed something. Again, please feel free to yell at me in the comments. I appreciate being corrected. Oh boy. Okay, this is a game that I am very excited to talk about. Even though FNAF AR Special Delivery is no longer playable as the service for it shut down on March 14th of 2024, I loved the sound effects that came out of this game. There was an entire portion of this game called the Animatronic Workshop, where you literally just got to inspect your collected animatronics and watch them do a little looped animation, moving around and making all sorts of wonderful noises. It is a goldmine for this video. However, there are way too many animatronics to cover individually in one video, so instead I'm just going to talk about the animatronics from each generation of their respected games. You'll see what I mean. If you want to see all the different sounds and animations for most of the animatronics and skins in the game, check out this video by Not Fredbear. I'll link it in the description as well, but I'll be using the audio and recordings from their video. I will not be covering all the different skins and variants of the animatronics, as there are a lot. Yeah, this was the era of FNAF merch slop, where Funko was trying to farm money off of this game's many skins. And, you know, some of them are cool, I won't lie, but again, Liberty fuck. Another thing I'll quickly mention is a weird design choice for the AR animatronics, in which they all have this plasticky hard shell instead of felt or fur. It works for the game's aesthetic though, so I don't hate it. Starting off with our first one here, we have the bear endoskeleton. This was the base character you had when downloading the game. It's simple and pretty much sounds like generic robot, but I do love the little whirring and humming sounds it makes in between movements, and it's the only animatronic in the game that makes them, so yeah, it makes this little dude unique. Then we have the FNAF 1 animatronics. Some of my favorite sounds in the game. The sounds of hinges and squeaky animatronic parts are great, and I think it accomplishes exactly what it's trying to do. I think the sounds are a little exaggerated at times, as they just kind of feel like robots as opposed to like animatronics, but I guess that's the point. Foxy has a different sound effect, but overall mostly the same, if not a little more broken and glitchy. Then we have the toys plus Balloon Boy. Balloon Boy sounds more like the FNAF 1 animatronics than the toys. He's very squeaky and overall generic, but yeah. All of the toys have a more rubbery plastic sound to them. I really like the sound effects that the servos make. It's just so satisfying. Mangle is also great in the game. Sounds like the other toys, but a bit more glitchy and endoskeleton-like, very fitting. Then we have Springtrap, and he sounds absolutely disgusting, which, yeah, it's perfect. The squelching and wet sound effects are super gross, and that combined with the metal animatronic parts, it just works. I'm not the biggest fan of his design in this game, as I do think it's a little messy and just kind of maximalism in terms of like his detail and look. But I think it's fitting for the game as well, so again, I don't mind. Then we have the Funtime gang, so Circus Baby, Ballora, and Funtime Freddy. Baby came out first, and you can kind of tell with how her sound design is more similar to that of the original 4, but it's got a few unique details that I think sound great, so yeah, I love it. Ballora sounds also incredible. She sounds lighter, and overall the little chime that plays, which is a nod to her music box, is such a sweet touch. Funtime Freddy is over the top, and it's perfect. Seeing Bonbon just jump off his hand and swing around his arm with this cartoony stretch animation, it's amazing. And whenever he takes a step forward, you can kind of feel how heavy he is. It's a loud thump, and even if it's just for a second, I think it works great. Then there's Plushtrap. He's a cutie. Little squeaky animatronic sounds for him, and it works well. Nothing too exciting, but he's adorable, so big fan. Also, Golden Freddy. I don't really think this hard plastic design works for him very well, as I mostly just picture him as an empty suit with no wires or servos. He's a bit too robotic for my liking, but it's still cool that they added him to the game. The last two characters I want to talk about are Jacko Chica and Jacko Bonnie. Their normal Nightmare counterparts aren't in the game, but I am glad that these two made it, as they just look awesome. I love the subtle fire sound effects, and as well as the glitchy, almost haunted stuttering animations they have. It reminds me a lot of Jacko Chica's voice from Ultimate Custom Night.
The fire within me burns eternal, and now you shall as well.
And that about does it for FNAF AR. There are so many good sounds in this game, and honestly, as much as it turned into a cash-grabbing sellout of a game, I still loved it. And I do wish it stayed around a little longer, even if there was never going to be any more content. I mean, God knows we needed more. Despite security breaches, very controversial lifespan, history of bugs, and gameplay issues stemming from a lack of communication between Steelwool and Scott, it undeniably has an amazing atmosphere and soundscape. I seriously will never get tired of the ambient music and sounds that create this uneasy feeling of being lost in a giant liminal mall space. However, many feel that this game is the start of an era in which FNAF games just aren't scary anymore. And while I agree that the same feeling of uncanny horror that early FNAF captured is not present in this game, it still accomplishes a different kind of horror in its own way, and I think that's liminal horror. I do want to dive deeper into this in another video, but I'm here to talk about the robot sounds that came out of this game, and there are a lot. There may be some sounds in this game that I miss as it is huge, but trying to cover every single sound would take ages, as pretty much everything that moves makes a myriad of sounds. I'll try my best to cover the ones that I think are worth talking about in the context of the video. I'm probably only going to be talking about footsteps and other movement-based sounds of the main 4 animatronics, plus some of the other friends as well. So, for example, like Freddy powering down or charging. Yes, that's technically an animatronic sound, but I'm not going to include that. Anyway, this game has 4 gigabytes worth of audio files, and it's very hard to find the right stuff, as a lot of them are not labeled in the files, so yeah. Starting with Freddy, whenever he runs around, these are his footsteps. The game takes a very futuristic robot aesthetic, so all the animatronics vaguely sound like this as well. It's a far cry from what real animatronics sound like, but suspend your disbelief for a moment and enjoy the sounds of robot animals from the future. Anytime Roxy or Chica walk around, this is what they sound like. It changes as they get closer and the footsteps start to overlap. I believe even Freddy shares similar footstep sounds, if not the same sounds in some instances. Roxy also has some wonderful servo sounds. Reminds me of the first cutscene in FNAF 2 we talked about. And here's Monty's footsteps. A bit heavier and closer to Freddy's since, you know, big, strong alligator man. Monty also has some servo sounds as well. Sounds like he's printing something. Whenever Roxy gets close enough to you, she can leap at you, and here's what that sounds like. Yeah, I don't think animatronics in real life will be flying at you anytime soon, but this is probably what it would sound like if they did. I do like the little startup sound she makes. It's both a cool choice and an important audio gameplay cue to let you know she's about to jump. Monty also jumps at you when close enough, and here's what that sounds like. Also a bit of a heavier sound than Roxy's jump. I can imagine it would hurt a lot if Monty tackled you. You know, not to say that Roxy wouldn't hurt either, but hey, I'm sure there is a large amount of people that would rather be tackled by Roxy than Monty. Sorry, I had to. The endoskeletons in the Weeping Angel portion of the game also have some pretty awesome sounds, and I'll play them for you now. I love how techno-y and cyber-y they feel. I'm a big fan of the boops and bops. Moon also has some fun sound effects when you stand near him, and it sounds like this. I love the sound of constantly shifting gears or strings being moved. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense logistically, like looking at him, what is making that sound? I don't know, but I do think it fits his character really well, and I never questioned it when I first played, so yeah, that's good sound design. Sun sounds very similar, if not the same. There are a lot of staff bots, and you hear the sounds that they make pretty much for the entire game, but I do love this little clip of the staff bot dancing after you give him a ticket. All the staff bots sound like this when they move, and it's generic robot sounding, but they kind of remind me of a little wind-up toy. The last character I want to talk about from the base game is Burntrap. He doesn't have many sounds in the actual boss fight against him, but his intro cutscene is full of animatronic sounds. Instead of playing the audio for you, take a look at his introduction. It's the epitome of killer robot. All the hissing and creaky metal sounds he makes, it's perfect, even if we only hear him for 15 seconds. Then we have the DLC for Security Breach, which is Ruin. There are a lot of new sounds here, but it's also a healthy mix of reused stuff from Security Breach, so, that makes sense. But I'll talk about the noteworthy stuff. I won't go over everyone again though, even though they sound and look slightly different, it's mostly the same. Eclipse has some great animatronic sounds. Take a listen to them in this cutscene. It's a close-up of the kind of sounds we hear from Sun and Moon in Security Breach. The slight squeak as you tilt his head is a great detail. Yeah, he sounds cool. I love how Freddy sounds in Ruin. He's evil in this game, and also maybe isn't the same Freddy as before. I don't know. It's confusing. There's a prototype word on his foot. I'm not sure what that means. Very killer robot as well, as most things are in Ruin, but his design is cool, like I said. Finally, we have the Mimic, making its debut at the end of the game. Pretty generic sounding robot stuff from him as well, but it gets expanded on a lot in Secret of the Mimic, which I'll cover last. Take a listen.
Gregory.
While he doesn't seem that heavy, his footsteps are loud, and I think it works really well in this last cutscene. He sounds terrifying. And that about does it for Security Breach. Yes, I know I didn't mention the Blob or the DJ, but honestly those teeter the line between animatronic and straight up monster, so I don't know. The DJ is exactly what you'd expect. It's just giant thumping. And the Blob is, well... Help Wanted 2 is Steelwool's second crack at the VR gaming experience in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, and while I think there are many things that this game does better than the first, I think there are also many things this game falls short of. Alas, that's a conversation for the future. But the noises that come out of this game are juicy. I won't be covering the reused stuff from Security Breach, but there are plenty of new sounds for the original minigames, so that's exciting. Glamrock Freddy in his parts and service section makes some really fun sounds. Take a listen. I love how full and bass heavy these sounds are. It's very futuristic robot, and I think it adds to the way he sounded before. Love the sound design in this game. Then we have the Helpy first aid section. Helpy makes these little robot twitching sounds as he's waiting to be operated on. Pretty minor, but I like that it's kind of just a subtle detail giving him sound, and that he's more than just a little plastic shell. The first VR game didn't do things like this, so I thought I'd include it to show the detail and work that Steelwool's put in. This is what Pig Patch sounds like when he's crawling an event. Very robotic and scrappy. You can kind of hear the off-brand in his servos moving around. I love it. Here's Lefty doing the same thing. A bit heavier and more high-tech. Lefty has a greater purpose of containing the marionette, so I like that there's some detail there. Then, finally, there's Scrap Baby, and this is what she sounds like. I love how she has this weird bwoop sound in her movements. I always thought her design fit really well in Scott's old game, The Desolate Hope. This game's whole aesthetic screams Scrap Baby to me, and the sound used for her in this Help Wanted 2 section definitely makes it seem like she comes from this game. Also, bonus, she clips her claw at you, which is a fun detail. Oh my god, her jump scare is so good in this game. In Phasor Blast, we get introduced to a new character original to this game. His name is Carney, and he's got the same base model as Rockstar Freddy and Lefty, just recolored. And he's got a little cool vest on and hat. He kind of looks like someone's FNAF OC, but you know, he's awesome. I love him. Here are the satisfying idle sounds he makes as he shifts around in his little booth. Pretty standard animatronic servos moving around, nothing out of place here. Remember how I wanted Captain Foxy to make animatronic sounds in Help Wanted 1? Well, he does make sounds in Help Wanted 2, as the log ride also returns. He sounds great, exactly like how I imagined an animatronic at the start of a dark ride sounds. You know, it works. Remember how I said Ballora doesn't make any sounds in her section of Sister Location? Well, she does make sounds in Help Wanted 2, as her Cross the Room section from Sister Location gets adapted in this game. It sounds like a music box being wound, and that ticking off as she slowly disappears into the dark works very great. It's minor details like this that add a ton of life to the characters. Funtime Freddy's Breaker Room section from Sister Location also gets adapted, and here are the sounds that he makes when he moves. If he's about to jump scare you, he actually reaches down at you and looks at you like this. The sound he makes when moving is terrifying. I mean, he's practically teleporting around, but the fact that it sounds like you can hear the air whoosh as he zips around shows how heavy he is. And I think it works very well combined with him actually reaching for you when he gets close enough. The last Sister Location section to get adapted is the private room. There are a lot of animatronics that make noise and also have amazing animation, so I'm going to show them to you all at once and then talk about it after. Ennard doesn't have that old slippery sound that he used to have. Instead, they gave him glitchy sounding robot sounds, you know, with lighter footsteps. It definitely works, but part of me wishes he still sounded slippery and all. Ballora sounds the same as she does in her personal section. Still love the music box jingles. Biddy Bab is terrifying, and like all the animatronics in this section, book it down the vent as soon as they see you, and it sounds perfect. Bon Bon and Funtime Freddy aren't that special. Definitely fun to see Bon Bon and hear her getting thrown, but otherwise, meh. Funtime Foxy is the fastest Foxy we have ever seen so far, so yeah. I mean, you barely have enough time to hear Funtime Foxy's footsteps coming at you, but they're there. Funtime Chica also makes an appearance. She wasn't in Sister Location, but it's nice to see her back at it again. And she makes some pretty standard robot noises too. And finally, Baby's here. I love the noises that she makes. Also very full-sounding, robust robot sounds. The whirring of the fan on her belly is also a nice touch, as sometimes I forget that it's on her design. Again, big props to Steel Wolf for adding such minor details like that. They definitely had a lot more fun with the animatronics in this one, and you can tell. And that wraps up FNAF Help Wanted 2. Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit is a really unique game with its pixel art style and fun game mechanics. I originally didn't think I was going to include it on this list, as the Yellow Rabbit, or Pit Bonnie, isn't really an animatronic. He's full-on Pennywise, fear-eating, reality-altering monster here. And while he does make some animatronic sounds, it's not really the same. But Then I remembered that Bonnie does the floss in the trailer for this game, which then made me remember that Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica do make it into the game as well, and they all have some really fun animatronic sounds. Here's a little compilation of all my favorite sounds and moments. Overall, they aren't really in the game for that long, and they also have more of a monster design to them in some of their sections, but they still do have animatronic-esque noises that I want to include, so yeah, take a listen. It's really fun to see them officially in a different art style, and I really do hope that there are more games like this coming out in the future, even though I don't really care for the books that much. Secret of the Mimic is the latest installment in the Five Nights at Freddy's series, and I do think it's pretty great. I wish it were scarier, as in my opinion most of the threats in this game are just sort of mascot horror schlop with big animated chase sequences and not a lot of tension. But that being said, there are plenty of memorable characters, and I think the Mimic is a great big bad. I'm also going to try to move quickly through this one, as it's another large game, so bear with me if I miss some characters or noises. In fact, for this game, since there are just a lot of new characters, and it's hard for me to remember all of them, I'm going to play a nice long compilation of all the different amazing sounds that I found in the files, and put the corresponding character that makes that sound next to them so you can see who's doing what. So close your eyes and listen to the wonderful animatronics of Secret of the Mimic. Actually, if you want to see which character is making what noise, maybe don't close your eyes. I just thought it would be cool if I said close your eyes. I don't even know why I'm keeping this part in the script. I should probably just... It seems like with Help Wanted 2 and Secret of the Mimic, Steel Wool has really found their footing when it comes to sound design. These were just some of my favorite noises in the game, but there are so many more. Each character in animatronic has a fully designed soundscape, and it literally would take hours for me to talk about all of it. I love how Big Top sounds. For whatever reason, he always reminded me of those traveling on the road carnival rides, you know, like these. The sounds he makes gives me those vibes. They nailed the large giant ticket machine. Birthday Dog is the name of that dog with the birthday outfit on in the files, and for whatever reason I love his sounds. The winding gears and clicking of animatronic parts are so satisfying. Jackie, of course, sounds great. Those long spindly arms that I imagine have the same texture and sound as those weird plastic tube toys. These things. Mr. and Mrs. Helpful's sounds are great too. I love the winding and cranking that it makes. Dolly is also great. The pistons and gear sounds she makes work very well with her puppet-like design. Her electric rail was an interesting choice, but considering she literally invented recycling, truly nothing about her design has me raising questions anymore. She wins. All the prototype animatronics in the Underground Freddy's part of the game sound great too. They remind me a lot of FNAF AR. And the Mimic itself is such a cool sounding character. The shifting and elongating parts that it has are super unique, and the heavy stomping footsteps it has are just as scary as they were in Ruin. Overall, the animatronics in this game definitely sound a lot more like animatronics than they do in other FNAF titles. The gears turning, the servos moving, especially the stationary ones. I don't know, the game just feels very grounded in reality, despite the insane amount of ridiculous things that happen. I think the setting being in the 70s helps a lot with making the animatronics sound more realistic, versus, you know, the artificial intelligent robot animals that stomp around in Security Breach. Like, when is that game supposed to take place?
Future!
And that concludes all the different animatronic sounds throughout the many FNAF games that I wanted to talk about. In the earlier FNAF games, there aren't as many sounds, so it's fun to talk in depth about the different ways in which the sounds are utilized. As FNAF got bigger over time, the budget grew, and there was more room for things like sound designers and different takes on the beloved franchise. Even though I do think the earlier FNAF games were scarier to me, there are still plenty of frightening moments in the later games despite the tone of horror being different. The subtle footsteps and quick movement sounds worked well because there wasn't a lot that needed to be shown. Whereas in the later games, as there's more budget for animation, chase sequences, and character interactions, there's also a greater need for sound designing and creating space for characters. So yes, bullying Roxanne Wolf is far from scary, but it comes with its own charms as well. She may not have that uncanny horror that the original FNAF animatronics do, but she does know how to rage bait.
I bet you don't even have friends.
Well, that's gonna do it for this video. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments, and if you enjoyed hearing me yap, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. It would mean a whole lot to me. I really enjoyed reading the feedback and comments of the last video. It's so cool to open a space to talk about this type of content, and I hope you all feel the same. Alright, that's it. Thank you. Bye-bye.